back to the Girly Girl Bookworm. So today I have my April wrap-up part 2 for you. I will say that I feel like April was an interesting month. I don't think it's going to end up being my smallest month. If not, it's like rivaling for February. So, I don't know. It was an interesting month. There were definitely things I really liked, and then there were some things that I didn't care for so much, but let's just dive right in. So the last wrap-up, I talked to you about 2 books that I was currently reading. One of them was Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. I really thought this was going to end up being a 4-star read, and it ended up being a 3-star read. I just completely felt super disconnected from this book. We are following our main character. She is going to enter this cooking show competition. She's recently divorced, so she's really trying to figure out herself. Like, she quit her job to go do the show, and she ends up meeting London, and they end up kind of sparking this kind of relationship, romance, like showmance almost. And I don't know, I wanted more cooking. I wanted something more. I just didn't feel like this did it. Like, for over 300 pages, like, this is almost a 400-page book if I remember correctly. Yeah, it's 370 pages. I just felt like there was never a point where, like, I was really, like, loving it. Like, I could put it down and I could kind of, like, forget about it. And I don't know, I just didn't love it as much as I wanted to. Same thing with Educated by Tara Westover. I ended up giving this 3 stars. It probably should have been more like a 2-star. This is a memoir about Tara. She is raised Mormon, I want to say. But they are kind of like survivalists, so like they don't trust doctors, they don't trust schools, they really keep to themselves and their community. And she decides that she kind of wants more than that. She really wants an education. She wants to go to college and do things like that. And I just don't necessarily buy Tara's story. She goes through a lot of traumatic things growing up, but she often will say that her journal entries don't match her memory. She will also say that her siblings or her parents say that things did or did not happen the way she says that they happened. And that just, to me, bothers me in the sense, like, I know that everybody can't have the same memory of every event. I get that. Sorry, my nose is suddenly running. And I understand that, but it just made it so, like, almost unbelievable. Like, I almost didn't trust her story anymore. And it just didn't feel believable that she can have basically 0 education, and then suddenly, like, when she could start driving, she could just, like, buy textbooks and she could teach herself to get into college. And, like, it just, like, I don't know why, but I'm, like, not buying it. So, unfortunately, I didn't like this one either. Then we're going to get to one that I did really enjoy, and that was Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis. Now, this one was kind of, like, not on my radar from wanting to read, but I needed an ebook, and this was available for download on Libby, so I was like, let's go. So I borrowed it, and guys, this was fantastic. Now, this is my second Fiona Davis book. I read The Masterpiece. I think I've, like, unhauled it. Like, I don't even think I own it anymore. Because it was, like, a fine read, but I didn't necessarily love it. This one was so good. It's a dual timeline story. We are following in 1919, right around the Spanish flu, and then we're also following in, like, 1966, I want to say, or somewhere in the 60s. And we're following this, like, mansion, the Frick Mansion. And our first character is kind of like a statue model and, like, an art model. And her mother has passed away from the Spanish flu, and she's really trying to figure out what she needs to do. She kind of almost gets caught up in, like, a murder scandal with her landlord, and she ends up kind of on the run, and she accidentally is, like, going by this mansion, and this woman kind of misunderstands her and thinks that she's there for an interview, so she takes it and becomes this, like, private secretary for one of the daughters that lives in this palace mansion. And she kind of gets all, like, swooped into that. And then in the 1966 one, we're following an actual model. She is from France, I'm going to say. And she comes over to do this modeling job at the Frick Mansion. She's trying to make a ton of money so that way she could send it back to her family, so that way they could take care of her sister, who is right now kept in a hospital. So she really wants to be able to take care of her sister. And when she's there, she ends up kind of, like, snow, like, there's a big, huge blackout, so she ends up stuck in this mansion, and she ends up uncovering this possible, like, scavenger hunt. And this was so good. It's got something for, like, everybody, especially if you like historical fiction. It's got historical fiction, it's got some romance, it's got some mystery, it's got the scavenger hunt, it's got a little bit of everything. And hands down, I loved this and couldn't get enough of it and gave this one 5 stars. Then my audiobook, I randomly found Dominicana by Angie Cruz on Hoopla, and I listened and, like, devoured this one, which I think I had been avoiding this one on my shelf just because I've heard that there's no quotation marks, and I have been struggling with books that don't have quotation marks, so I figured if I listen to it, then that's perfect because, like, I won't notice that there's no quotation marks, and I'll be able to understand the flow of dialogue much easier. So I did it that way, and it was really good. So this one is following a young girl. She's 15, and she basically gets promised off to marry this guy, so that way she can leave the Dominican Republic to go to New York with him and possibly start a new life and potentially bring her family up there and send money back and vice versa. And she's 15, and she's basically a baby, and she ends up married to this guy, and she ends up in this life that she did not expect for herself, and she's trying to figure out what she needs to do for her family and what she does for herself. She finds herself into some very hard predicaments. I don't want to, like, say anything because it is such a, like, personal growth story that, like, I don't really want to, like, ruin her story for you. But it was really great. There's a Q&A that was at the end of the audio with the author, and it just really brought the story home, too. It's kind of loosely based on her mother. Like, not to the T, like, biographically. Like, she tried to switch it up so it wasn't exactly her mother's story. But it was really good, and it's historical fiction as well. So you have some historical fiction. You've got those elements. And just seeing that true immigration story, because I feel like even though it's set back when it was set, I feel like immigrants are still going through very similar stories to her. So definitely one that I highly recommend. If you can get the audiobook, get the audiobook. And I give that 4 stars. Then I read Such a Quiet Place by Megan Miranda. You know me, I love Megan Miranda, so the fact that this was still unread on my shelf is very shocking to me. This was recommended to me by Kendra for my Instagram challenge because she knew that I needed to get to it, so she had recommended it so that I would get to it. And unfortunately, this didn't do it for me like other books by her. So we're following this small, like, community neighborhood, and there was a double murder that had occurred about 14 months prior. And one of the girls that lives in this neighborhood went away for this crime. She was a complete suspect, like, they saw her on cameras, but now there has been new information that's come to light, and she is now free. And our main character is, like, cooking in her kitchen one day, and then out of nowhere she hears something, and this girl just, like, walks in and is like, "Hi, I'm back!" And she tries to insert herself, and she's like, do I trust her? Is she a murderess? Like, what's going on? Like, what do I do? Everyone's looking at me. Like, and things start to spookily happen, and we are trying to figure out what happened really in the past and what's currently going on. I gave it 3 stars. 3.5 stars, actually. Did I fix that? Yeah, 3.5 stars. I think that the twists and the things that happened at the end, like, redeemed itself a little bit, which is why I gave it that extra half star, but the beginning half, like, from the get-go, it felt super creepy, and then by the middle, it just kind of, like, fell really flat for me and very slow, and then the end picked back up. So 3.5 stars. Not her best. Not my favorite book by her. Then I read Take My Hand, and I borrowed this one from the library. Guys, I was the first person on this whole list for this book. I, like, never end up first on anybody's list, let alone a book for hold list. That didn't sound right. I'm on my husband's first list and my daughter's, and you know what I mean. But yeah, so this one was a very interesting story. If you like Necessary Lies by Diane Chamberlain, you are going to love this one. We are following a woman, and she's new out of nursing school. Her dad's a doctor. He probably wanted her to go be a doctor, but she decides nursing is for her, and she ends up working at this, like, family, like a Planned Parenthood type of place. And one of her first jobs is to go give these birth control shots to these little girls. So she goes there, and she finds this 11 and 13-year-old girl like, their sisters, they've never even, like, kissed a boy, let alone, like, one of them hasn't even started her, menstruation cycles in the first place, but she's giving them birth control. Like, it just, like, blows her mind. She's like, why are we doing these poor black girls? She's black herself, too, but she's kind of come from a more privileged life, and she wants to stop it, and she wants to do what she can for this family, and it spirals from there. And this one was really good as well. I gave this one 4 stars. I will say it does get a little bit slow at points, but it is a very solid story. It's based on true events as well. And I love when historical fiction is based on true events, because it just, like, really brings history to life and gives it emotion and things to connect to. And I really like this one. This one's actually currently a Book of the Month choice. So if you're interested in Book of the Month, book. I always have my link down below. You get your first book for $5. You can't go wrong with that. But it's currently a choice. So if you are interested in that book, definitely go check that one out. I will say there are trigger warnings, though, for sterilization and abortion. So if those things are going to trigger you, I would definitely pass from this one. Then I read Mulberry Holo by Denise Hunter. I listened to this one on audio, and I kind of regret it. That's the first time I've ever listened to Denise Hunter on audio, and it will probably be my last because it just didn't fit right with me. I normally read her books physically or read them as an ebook, and I saw the audio and I was like, I should give that a try, and it didn't work out so well. This is the second book in the Riverbend series, and we are following the sister from the first book. So we're following Avery, and she is starting her clinic and living life, she decided in the end of the last book a big decision, and so she's still stewing on it a little bit. And I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to spoil it. I think I might have spoiled it already in another video by accident. But then we are following Wes, and Wes is currently walking the Appalachian Trail as a deal with his buddy. His buddy ended up passing away, so he made a promise that he was going to finish this walk for his friend. And he ends up getting sick as a dog and winds up on Avery's doorstep, and he doesn't want to owe her anything. He has no insurance, so she's like, let's make a deal. You rest and you stay here and I take care of you. You help me fix up my carriage house for this new doctor that I'm looking to hire, so that way they have a place to stay when I hire one. And he's like, cool deal, but he knows that he is trying to make it to New York so that way he can fulfill his other promise to his buddy, which is being there for his sister. So he feels like he has a relationship with her. He feels like they're going to get married because he told his buddy he was going to take care of her. So that's his end goal. So meeting Avery has really been a bump in the road. I gave this one 4 stars, and I will say that I just feel like the audiobook completely disconnected me from connecting to either one of these characters. It just felt like a story that didn't feel very special. It felt like a story that I could disconnect from and not really listen to thoroughly, although I still really enjoyed the story. So I think the audiobook just left me a little unconnected, so I ended up going with 4 stars, but I still can't wait for the next book, and I know not to try the audiobook again for her books. Another book that I started on audio, I'm not done yet, is Court by Tracy Wolff. This book is massive. I don't even know where I am in here, because it's obviously, like I said, I'm listening on audio. It said I'm 20% through. So I'm assuming the OMG. I'm in the middle of a chapter 2, which probably doesn't help matters, but I'm somewhere in this book. I'm 23% through. This is the 4th book in the Court series. I believe this is the last book in the actual series. I know there's going to be spin-offs and things like that, but I think this is the last one in the original quartet. We are following, in the first book, a young girl whose parents pass away, so she goes to stay with her uncle and cousin, and he has this school in Alaska, so she goes to stay with him, and then she finds out that vampires, dragons, witches, you name it, are real, and it sparks a whole bunch of stuff. And then a book that I almost DNF'd, but I didn't, was The Cartographers by Peng Shepherd. I think I picked it up at the wrong kind of moment because Amber gave it 3.5 stars, and Kendra gave it 3 stars, and I was like, I don't want to read a almost 400 page book just to give it 3 stars. And it was kind of wordy in the beginning, and I was like, oh no, I think I need to DNF this. And then I didn't, and thank God I didn't, because I gave this 4 stars. I almost gave it 4.5 stars, so I'm glad I didn't DNF it. So this is following a girl, I forgot her name, Nell, and she is a cartographer. It's in her blood. Her dad was a cartographer, and 7 years ago, she found this, like, box of, like, junk, and she's like, Dad, what is this? And she thinks it's more than he thinks it is, and he basically gets her fired. Her and her boyfriend fired. And so she does not speak to her father ever again, and it's hard for her to get a cartography job because basically her dad is a bigwig, and because he has said so, she's basically blacklisted from the job. It's now 7 years later, and her father is now dead, and she goes to get his stuff, and she finds this map, the map that basically sparked this whole drama in the first place, and she's starting to realize that there are some secrets, and she needs to kind of unveil them and go through them. This is a book that definitely has a magical element, which I was not expecting, and I can see why some people have a problem with it, because it is not really fully explained at all, but I kind of didn't mind that it wasn't fully explained. Like, I could kind of, like, look past it and just kind of take it as a magical realism element, with the fact that, like, I don't really understand maps to begin with. As much as I love maps, I don't really understand them, which is such a bad thing to say. My dad used to own a surveying and engineering company, so I should know more about maps than I do. And my husband teaches history, which is also very map-oriented, and so I should know more about maps than I do, but I just kind of took the magic for what it was, and I didn't really need a huge explanation for it. So I found it really intriguing. There's some mystery and adventure and intrigue and suspense built into this contemporary magical realism set book, and like I said, I almost gave it 4.5 stars. It did feel, like I said, a little wordy in the beginning, but once I was really, like, set into this writing style, I was totally cool with it, and I flew through the second half, so I'm glad I didn't DNF it, because I really enjoyed that one. I did take a little bit of a break with that one. Like, I read about 50 pages, and then I was like, maybe this isn't for me, or maybe I read 100. I don't remember. I did a little bit of reading of that one, and I was like, maybe it's not for me. Maybe I just need to put it on hold. Maybe I just can't focus on that right now. And I picked up Everything We Didn't Say by Nicole Bart. And this was another one that I was kind of leery about because I hadn't heard a ton of things about it. And I think the things I had heard about it was a slow book. And I was like, oh, I don't really want a slow book right now. And I'm glad that I picked it up because I actually, again, really enjoyed this one. I gave this one 4 stars. We're following a girl. She's coming back to her hometown to basically take care of her, like, sick friend. She's going to help her work at the library. But she also has ulterior motives where she kind of wants to get her daughter, who she's never had custody of. She wants to kind of get her daughter back to go live with her. So she's got kind of an ulterior motive. And also there's a podcast that is talking about a murder that took place 14 years prior that her brother was kind of the suspect for, and she's kind of nervous about the fact that this is kind of being brought back up again, so she's trying to figure that out as well. So we're following that perspective, but we're also following that 14 years prior when that murder took place, and we're kind of unveiling what actually happened. I did kind of at one small point suspect who did it, but it was very much close to the end before I kind of figured it out, and I didn't figure out the why or how, so it's still a book that, like, isn't 100% predictable, which I can always appreciate. It was just a solid read, which I love with a thriller. Like, it didn't bring anything new to the table. It wasn't 100%, oh my gosh, shocking, I need to love this forever. But I really enjoyed it, so I gave it 4 stars. Then I am currently reading 2 books. Actually, I should probably talk about this one first. I, at the last second, finished Wolf Winter by Cecilia Ekbach. This is the last book that I needed to read before my book buying challenge was done, because I'm not counting my buddy read as a fail, because we failed completely by not reading the buddy read, and we're going to read it at some point, hopefully in May. So that's not counting towards my book buying ban. But this was the last one I needed to read for the book buying ban challenge. This was also the last one I needed to read for my 12 books challenge. So I'm glad to say I finally finished, but I will say that I finished with my least favorite book. I'm so sorry, Amber. So this book was kind of pitched when I read the synopsis as like a historical thriller. So I was like, yes. And it said that it took place like in the 1700s, and they moved to this mountain, and there's a death, and they think that it could have been animals, but they think it could have been something more sinister. So I'm expecting this like isolated mountain with just this family. And that's not what I got. I feel like this is more of like a historical fiction with a problem attached to it versus a thriller. So I was 100% disconnected from this. I didn't really like the characters. There's also a lot of religion pushed into this because there's a priest and a bishop, and I could not read this fast enough. I think at one point I put my speed to 3.5 because I just like needed to get it done. I just wasn't interested. I did not care. 2 stars. Probably should have given it 1, but I think it's also I went in with the wrong headspace. I didn't like that one. I'm currently reading 2 books. Today is April 30th, so I technically could finish one of these. I don't think I will. But I am currently reading The Change. This is also a Book of the Month book choice. I think it's actually one of the add-ons. So plug for Book of the Month again. I'm not sponsored in any way, shape, or form. I just love Book of the Month. So this is about women who they find out like once they start kind of hitting menopause that they have like special powers, which is kind of fun. And it's got some murder mystery going on. It's got some interesting like thoughts about women and feminism and what it means to be a woman and what we go through on a daily basis and the change and just everything. Expectations with jobs and sexism and just, so it goes into a lot. So it's not just like a mystery thriller, but it's a mystery thriller with magical realism, but literary fiction at the same time. It's got a lot of things going on for it. I'm about 30-ish% into that one, and I'm enjoying it so far. And then I also started yesterday morning, Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I am 92 pages in. I'm really liking this one as well. This one is also historical fiction, also kind of looking into that feminism and like what it means to be a woman and sexism and things as well. Didn't do that on purpose. Also Book of the Month. So this one is following our main character. We know in the beginning that she is a single mom, and she's a scientist, but she is somehow like the star of this cooking show. And then we kind of like rewind and find her as she is like first becoming a scientist and her first time on the job and her falling in love. And I don't know how it's going to play out. I really didn't even like read the synopsis going into it, so I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil anything because I feel like I would spoil myself. So I don't know. I'm enjoying it so far, and I will talk more about that obviously in my May wrap up. So that is how the second half of April went for me. How did it go for you? Let me know down below, and I will see you guys really soon. Bye, everybody.